everyone. This is episode 7 of the MIT Sloan CIO online series. And before we get going, I just want to do a little bit of housekeeping. First of all, the next CIO symposium will be on May 20th, and we hope that you join us. We're also going to have a VIP-only pre-event on May 19th that will include roundtable discussions, a cocktail reception with our innovation showcase, as well as a dinner with the CIO Leadership Award finalists. If you are interested in joining that, you can join our Innovator Plan and our online community. It's $75 a year. When you join, you'll be given a code to get discounted tickets to the symposium. You'll be granted access to the pre-event, and you'll also be able to enjoy our new Innovator series, which is limited only to people who are paid subscribers. And let me just mention what those upcoming events are. On February 25th, we'll have an open Q&A with myself and Irving. You can talk about this podcast or other podcasts, or in fact, any type of technology question. We're there to talk to you about it. Then on March 4th, we will have George Corbin coming in. He's going to do a format with a 30-minute presentation and a 30-minute Q&A. On March 18th, Irving and I will return for an open Q&A. And on April 1, we will have George Westerman come, and he's going to give, again, just like Corbin, a 30-minute presentation and 30-minute Q&A. So that's all exciting, all stuff that you can join. Now, today we're talking about the longer-term evolution of AI and robotic technologies. And the conversation today is based upon 3 blog posts that Irving has written. These posts get put in the public square on our online community. To access the public square, you can be a friend, which is free. You just have to answer a few questions and be admitted by our community manager. Or if you're an innovator, which I mentioned is $75 a year, you also get access to the public square. So the 3 posts are the future of AI and robotics, the 2025 prediction scorecard, which was produced by Rodney Brooks, which Irving goes over. The second one is the future of self-driving cars and robo-taxis, another blog post based upon a part of Rodney Brooks's prediction scorecard. And finally, what will it take to get AI right? A 2050 thought experiment, which is from another writer. I'll let Irving introduce him. And speaking of Irving, how are you?
Hello, Alan. I have enjoyed our various discussions before, so I'm looking forward to this one as well.
Well, that's good, because I've enjoyed them too. So, Irving, back in episode 1, I don't know if you and I can remember that far back, but we actually did episode 1 back in the fall. And believe it or not, we were talking about Rodney Brooks again. And in that episode, we went over in quite a bit of detail the 7 deadly sins of AI. This is in particular Rodney expressing mistakes that people make when they're trying to predict the advance of AI. So just to bring the listeners up to speed, can you just enumerate what these 7 deadly sins are?
Yes, I will do that. Let me just remind everybody that Rodney Brooks was the closing speaker at the 2024 symposium. And that's when I first heard this term from Rodney. And maybe you can mention our closing speaker for the 2025 symposium later. But anyway, or maybe you want to mention it now?
Well, no, I mean, the closing speaker for 2025 is Darren Acemoglu, and he won in 2024 the Nobel Prize in Economics. And so we are very pleased to have him join us this year. We've been having some very prominent people be our closing speakers.
No, we had Sandy Pentland in 2022. We had David Autor in 2023, Rodney, as we mentioned, and now Darren. Anyway, Rodney told us actually at the keynote he gave that breathless predictions about AI are nothing new. They've been happening ever since AI became an academic discipline in the 1950s. The only difference is that at the time and for the next, let me say, 50 years, nobody cared that much about AI outside the academic community and the people doing research about AI. Now, the world at large cares about AI, and that's the big difference. And then he explained in his keynote and then in the blog that I wrote about it, why have so many AI predictions turned out to be so wrong? And let me just quickly, very quickly, enumerate what he said were the answers, which he called the 7 deadly sins of predicting the future of AI. And he wrote that in a 2017 essay. Number 1, overestimating and underestimating. AI has the distinction of having been the shiny new thing, being overestimated again and again and again in the 1960s, in the 1980s, and he believes now again. So that's one. Second one is indistinguishable from magic. Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And what that means is that if it's an advanced technology that's going to the future, we don't know how it's going to play out, so we don't know its limitations, so we may as well call it magic. And that's a lot of what people do. Third, when it comes to AI, he said, many people are suffering from a severe case of exponentialism. And what that means is that people say, look, I remember Moore's law. For 50, 60 years, digital technologies and so on kept advancing exponentially. AI has been making huge progress, let's say, in the last 20, 25 years, and therefore it's going to continue. We can expect AI to keep advancing just like Moore's law did for a long time. But Rodney reminded us that exponentials cannot go on forever. Even Moore's law eventually has slowed down and flattened out, and he believes after a while AI will keep making progress, but nothing like we have seen in the last 10, 15 years. Number 4, he called it performance versus competence. When we use cues about how people perform some particular tasks when we see how well they do in other tasks. So, Allan, if you sound very smart, my impression is, oh my God, Allan is a very smart person, so he's going to continue to do that. And we ascribe the same kinds of attributes to AI. So when we see AI doing some incredible things like large language models, which can understand what we say and can reply in very smart ways based on statistical analysis of language, we say, my God, any technology that can do that will be able to do just about anything. So we carry that exponentialism and that competence into the future. Number 5, a lot of AI research imagine that the world is already totally digital and all we need to do is introduce new AI technologies and they will immediately trickle down operationally and things will get done. And Rodney reminds us that just about all innovations in robotics and AI will take far, far longer than we imagine to be widely deployed in the marketplace because there is a big difference between an instance of a technology doing very well, something that happens in the research lab, and being deployed at scale so everybody uses it. That's not the same thing. Number 6 is what Rodney called Hollywood scenarios, that we say, it won't be long before we have a, a artificial general intelligence, artificial super intelligence. What will happen to the world by then? And what Rodney reminds us is even if we get that, we won't get it for the next 3 years, 5 years, or even 10 years. It's going to take a while. And by then, the world will have changed to be so that we learn how to live with increasingly smart technologies. So this is not like one day we wake up and the Martians have landed and the world is totally different. That's why he calls it a Hollywood scenario. Let's assume that AI has advanced like crazy by 2050. Well, so will the world. So will we have advanced, and therefore will be far more prepared on how to deal with it. And the final one is something I had never heard of before, which is what he called the suitcase word, which is a term that can have multiple different and confusing meanings depending on the context in which they are used. And what happens is when we hear, oh my God, AI has done something incredible, like the LLMs or some more recent research in drugs, we immediately assume that it's going to be able to do things like that everywhere, because the fact that it did it here means it has now these incredible things, and that's not the case. In the world of research and technology, you have to keep working really hard, case by case, to advance. So those are Rodney's 7 deadly sins.
All right. So, Irving, I want to make a comment about the deadly sins, and then I have a follow-up question for you. So my comment is, I was cleaning out my office the other day and ran across a prediction scorecard from, I guess, somewhere around 2016 that I had picked up from a guy, one of these guys that spoke at places like Singularity University. You might
Right, right.
remember there was a
Yeah,
time when many people, including me, flew out to California, spent a few days at Singularity University. There was a book called The Singularity. The
right.
interesting thing about these predictions is I read them over the other day, and every single one was wrong. They were all wrong. And the thing that I guess I want to emphasize here is the reason you and I are putting emphasis on Rodney Brooks, especially after meeting him at the symposium, is that he not only produces this prediction scorecard,
Yes.
but he updates it every single year and plans to update it every single year until he's 95 years old. So for quite a while. And so he holds himself accountable. So I think there's a lot of gravitas to his scorecard
Unfortunately.
compared to scorecards you get from other places. So I guess the question I have for you um, is, except for Rodney, do you think we've made any progress in addressing these issues of making mistakes when we predict AI?
Well, we're still in the early stages of this advanced era of AI. And again, we have to remember what Rodney said. It started as an academic discipline in the 1950s in a meeting of top academics from MIT, Stanford, and other places in Dartmouth University. But the hype has been followed by AI winters, as he mentioned. We had one in the 60s, 70s, another one in the 80s, 90s, and he's worried if we keep hyping it up, maybe we'll have another one, or at least some kind of a market crash. But that happens with any new technology. Alan, remember the dot-com bubble in the 90s? We got so excited about the internet, properly so. The internet and the World Wide Web enable us to do incredible things. And we said, okay, it's over. Now the world will be transformed. Now the internet has a huge impact, just like you and I doing this podcast, this this fireside chat over the internet, over Zoom, but there are other areas where we still have a ways to go, even with the internet. I was just talking to a friend at IBM the other day. You know, where are we in smarter cities? We had these glorious things that everything would be smarter. Things are advancing, but they're not smarter the way we thought they would be 15, 20 years ago. Some things are harder than others, and that's why, first of all, we should know that in MIT, because one of the things I like so much about MIT is that not only do the people at MIT come up with great new ideas, but they know that the test of your ideas is out in the real world. It's not just writing wonderful research papers and books. It's how well have you deployed this idea in the real world at scale.
We're going to come back to that comment later, Irving.
Good. So can we move on to the second
Yeah, so
rapid
so here,
growth?
here's the thing. Yes, let's move on to self-driving cars. So when I cleaned out my drawer, like I told you, one of the predictions that was on this little sheet that I had from circa 2016 was that the roads were going to be crawling with self-driving cars by 2025. And I thought to myself, well, I don't have to worry about my kids taking away my car keys. My car will just drive me around anywhere I want. And well, here we are in 2025, and I just put that piece of paper in the recycle bin, and I don't see these cars roaming around the street. So what went wrong, Irving?
Well, what went wrong gets back to hype, to the fact that we way underestimated the difficulty of developing truly self-driving cars. That is, there is no driver at the steering wheel, and it's all managed by AI-based technology, radars, lidars, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, different things that know what they're doing. And cars, as I wrote in the blog based on Rodney's uh, essay, cars are the quintessential AI technology because some of the more advanced technologies, even LLMs, people may not know precisely what the hell are you talking about. Everybody knows about driving cars. It's something that we've been doing for decades and decades and decades. And so the idea of a self-driving car is a concept we can all grasp. And therefore, when people, including some people who should have known better, kept predicting we'll have fully self-driving cars, they will be safe, etc. in just a few years. When they made those predictions, that was something everybody could understand. And what happens is we absolutely underestimated by a lot the difficulty of having self-driving cars. And I think it's because a lot of it is hype. Let's not make a mistake about that. But the other one is we underestimate, and we still do this all the time, the difference between a machine that can do lots of things very, very well and a human being that can react to situations they may not have seen before, but they can apply their human judgment and handle lots of situations that may be totally new, whereas the poor machine has had to be trained to handle new
All
situations.
right, so I want to drill into this point that you're making right now. So you talked about hype, but I also think there's a matter of the goalposts have moved a little bit. You know, self-driving cars originally were completely autonomous machines that went across the roads as they exist today. Nowadays, if you look at the actual self-driving cars that have been deployed as robo-taxis,
Right.
they have remote operators bringing the human element that you're just speaking about to this. So when do you think we're going to get to actual autonomy?
We don't
Self.
know. The reality is that we don't know. That is, and let me tell you, the reason that the robot taxis that have been deployed, initially with Waymo and Cruise. Waymo is owned by Google, and it was developed by Google. They've spent billions. Cruise was developed by GM, and eventually they abandoned it. The reason you needed the operators is because every so often the self-driving car encounters a situation that they have never seen before. It may be a fire, it may be a truck that is not moving, etc. And they are being monitored by a group of humans, of operators in each of these cities where we have self-driving cars, including San Francisco, Arizona, and others. Why is that important? Because the economics of robotaxis and self-driving cars was that because you don't need a driver anymore, the taxi is going to be so much less expensive. But if all of a sudden, for each of those cars, you need a cadre of people monitoring the car and coming in and reacting, and even sending a human if necessary to help the car get out of a situation, all of a sudden the economics are not very good, even for taxis, let alone for an individual. Alan, you, if you wanted to own a self-driving car, then you would have to subscribe to a service that monitors your self-driving cars. So all of a sudden, not only are you buying a car, you have to now buy a service that makes sure your car doesn't get in trouble. The ROI is totally different with that kind of car that requires humans monitoring it than a total self-driving car. And I hadn't heard that much about it. There have been some articles in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and others, but Rodney made a big deal of that.
So, Irving, I want to drill down on the economics a little bit here. In your blog post, you talk about how Rodney makes the argument that we might have been better off focusing on smart road infrastructure before focusing on building the cars. I'm not sure that I completely agree with this argument, but before I give you my counterpoints, why don't you summarize this argument that maybe we could have done a better job by building common infrastructure?
Well,
And also talk about the historical precedent for
yeah,
Rodney's argument.
yeah, and that I hadn't heard before, that kind of argument. What Rodney wrote is that throughout history, going back to the Roman legions in Europe, probably, I don't know, 100 BC or before that, if you wanted the legions to be able to march through Europe or wherever they went, uh, they were not out there with machetes going through, well, there are no jungles in Europe, but going through the woods, making sure they can go. To be able to have the legions move fast, they built roads. Some of them still stand. Now, move over to the 19th century when steam trains first started. Guess what governments had to build to support the trains? It's called railroads. And there was a massive investment in railroads in the US, in the UK, in all kinds of advanced economies that enabled the trains to roll. Now, let's get to the 20th century and the advent of the automobile. Guess what state and federal governments had to do to support the automobile? They had to build roads over which the automobile traveled. And, and then we had the interstate uh, roads that the Eisenhower administration built in the 1950s to make travel much more efficient. What Rodney pointed out is that there was an implicit promise in self-driving cars that you no longer need to build the kind of shared infrastructure that the Romans built, that railroads had to be built, that cars had to be built. You just need to put technology in each car. And because AI is so powerful and so on, that will take care of everything without the expense of government-supported shared infrastructure. Rodney didn't mince words. He said that was wrong. That was absolutely wrong, and that we would have been better off spending the time in the last, let's say, 10 years building shared infrastructure with government support and with car companies and technology companies, and the self-driving car or the cars that want to be called self-driving would get a lot of help from the shared infrastructures to prevent accidents, let them know what other cars ahead of them are doing. But we didn't do that. And he said that was a big missed opportunity
Yeah,
because
so
we were promised that this time they were not necessary, getting back to the seven deadly sins, because AI is so incredible, magical, it can handle it all by itself.
I mean, in addition to the examples you've given, I think that government also played a role in laying down the infrastructure for the distribution of electricity. I could go on with other
Absolutely.
examples, and I think that historically, I agree with Rodney that the government has played a role in laying down infrastructure. Where I think I would push back is, and I should say that I also think that we may get to a point in the future when we are capable as a government of providing that kind of infrastructure for technology. But in recent history, we have not had a very good track record. I'll just point out to you that we had
In
a
the US.
effort, yeah, in the US.
No, no, but it's important to add that because other countries have done much better in building shared infrastructure.
That's true. I'm being US centric here, and I apologize to our international audience, but nevertheless, I'm going to go on and
Go
point
ahead.
out
Go
a
ahead.
couple of examples. Uh, we budgeted 5 billion to put out charging stations for electric vehicles. That was not very successful, and that's a much easier task than making smart roads. We also had the California high-speed rail project, where it was estimated to have invested like 33 billion, or maybe 100 billion. Actually, I'm not exactly sure of the number, but I don't see any trains going down any tracks. There was a large investment in broadband for rural communities. Turns out that Starlink does a much better job and has been used both in war and in disaster. So, um, the government, I think, has sort of lost its way in its ability to build this shared infrastructure, and that's something that if we're going to deploy self-driving cars, we need to get back and have the
No
capability of doing it. So
question.
I don't disagree with Rodney, but I do think it's important to point out that in the era where self-driving cars were coming up, it may have been just money completely wasted.
Yeah, I mean, you said it all. I have nothing really to add that, and a number of people have said this, that, we just have not been very good at major government-sponsored projects for a number of decades now. Even the vehicles that get us to the space station and the moon,
Oh,
as,
please.
as
Let,
you look at private sector companies, how well they've done, whereas it's not just government, even big, you need innovation, and that's something we need to get back to and figure out how to do better. So,
So, you got Tesla, you got Waymo, you got Cruise, and all these companies are taking different approaches. Uh,
well,
what's working, Irving, and what's not?
well, uh, Rodney pointed out that the only one that is operational now is Waymo.
Mhm.
And the reason it's operational is that Waymo is owned by uh, Google. Google has tremendous technology and is very, very successful economically because of search and advertising and things like that. So they can afford to invest billions and billions in the technology. GM, which is not a small company, tried to go the same way, and they eventually got into some legal troubles in San Francisco and decided to pull out. They are now totally just investing in making GM cars safer, not with self-driving technologies, but with technologies that assist present drivers like you and I making our cars safer, which we use every day to keep us in our lane, to warn us when we're getting too close to the car ahead, and so on. And there are a couple of startups that are building brand new cars to be self-driving cars, as opposed to retrofit the technology into existing cars like Waymo and Cruise were doing, but they are brand new. And so Rodney points out that right now the only company that has actual self-driving taxis is Waymo. And his prediction, remember, he makes predictions and then he comes back and tests himself, is that if Waymo hasn't made fantastic progress to be able to deploy their robotaxis at scale across the country. He's very pessimistic for the progress of self-driving cars and robotaxis over the next many years. Eventually, they may be here, but he's giving Waymo 2 years to prove the viability of the business model.
So let me ask about Waymo a little bit. So is he giving Waymo 2 years to build a self-driving car with existing road infrastructure, or uh, does he feel that one of the barriers to success is this lack of
No,
uh,
first of all, no,
infrastructure?
no.
And do we need now to kind of step back and build the smart infrastructure in order for these companies to be successful?
Well, Rodney believes that's what we need, but he is absolutely not making a prediction that we will do that, because as a country, that would take a major effort to do that as a public-private kind of enterprise. So he's giving Waymo 2 years to show that you can actually make money from from self-driving cars with existing technologies. The reason he thinks that's very important is because in addition to Waymo, there are a couple of startups with self-driving cars. And remember, a startup doesn't have the kind of money that Google has.
No, of
And
course not.
so, and so he thinks if we don't make progress there, all these startups will just go nowhere. That's what he's saying.
All right, so he's given 2 years for self-driving cars, existing road infrastructure. What do you think are the major barriers to adoption uh, for this?
We don't have the technologies. It's much harder than we think for now. Maybe we will develop them in the future. Uh, just as an example, you don't have to go and say, we absolutely need to do this in downtown Boston and New York and so on. You could even say, well, Irving, how about just like we have MOV lanes. That is, if you go on the interstate, there is a lane that is reserved for cars with multiple passengers. So how about just doing that for long distance travel of cars and trucks, and just starting to build the infrastructure across interstate? Don't try to do that in Midtown Manhattan or in Boston's relatively crazy traffic. Do it in these self-driving lanes. That could be a superb, far easier experimental thing to do. And the trucking companies may even be involved in helping build that. So he's saying that we overreached and sort of swung for the fences, and maybe we should have taken a more incremental approach, which is how major infrastructures get built.
All right, so
You and I have talked.
last question about
Yes,
cars, and then we're going to pivot to your
yes.
last blog post. So you talked about focusing on the interstate. You talked about self-driving lanes. You talked about the trucking industry. You talked about, kind of focusing our efforts on something that we can achieve. But here's the thing. What are the unintended consequences? What about jobs? What's going to be the impact? Let's just talk about that for a second, and then we'll pivot.
Well, the impact on jobs is that if people believe that cars will not require drivers, maybe people driving taxis, and I'm including Uber and Lyft and so on, may have fewer jobs. And maybe something will happen that Daron Acemoglu has called in real academic papers bullshit automation. And what he means by that is automation that replaces people but is inferior to the job that people were doing. And he's very worried that uh, we will try to apply AI just to apply technology, we'll get rid of jobs, and then the customers will be less well off. Let me give you a potential example. Uh, there are many places where AI, even today, is incredibly useful. You've been using it, ChatGPT and so on, to help you uh, prepare a draft of an article or the description of a session for the CIO symposium. The AI is doing a fantastic job in the world of research, finding potential cures for cancer, taking into account lots more things, and so on. So the AI has been very good at that. But then the last thing you want to do is say, just as an example, AI is ready for total self-driving cars, and people will lose jobs that were driving taxis and so on. And it turns out the self-driving cars, people start getting a lot more accidents. And you know what will happen? Governments will clamp down like they did on Cruz. San Francisco pretty much told Cruz, you cannot do that until you fix your cars. Another example, Alan, is uh, AI-based customer service for people who are confused and call a number, and instead of speaking with a human, they're speaking with an AI. And there have been lots of articles about how frustrating that experience is, because when you're confused, you don't have a clear description of why you are confused. And when you're talking to a human, part of the qualities of humans is by interacting with you, you will jointly understand the confusion and fix the problem, or at least try to fix the problem. But if you start laying off customer service people, replacing them with AI, and providing much more inferior customer service, that would be a very good example of what Daron meant by bullshit automation.
Yeah, well, so two comments and then we'll pivot. First of all, with the customer service example, interestingly, it's not clear that AI makes the customer service inferior. In fact, that studies show that a lot of people like to ask the AI first and then go to the human if they can't get the answer. I think because they're embarrassed about their question, but I'm not sure. Second thing is just getting back to the seven deadly sins. AI is very difficult to predict in the short term, but when we're talking about the long term, never say never.
It
I
will get better, no
I
question.
I distinctly remember back before the turn of the century, people arguing with me that AI will never win at Go. Well,
Yeah, we agree.
look what happened. It took a while, but here we are. All right, we're going to pivot, Irving. We're going to talk about getting AI right by 2050. We're going to start thinking in the long term.
Yes.
Uh, so you remember James Manyika?
Manica.
Manica, thank you. He used to be at McKinsey.
He was the director of the McKinsey Global Institute,
And he was a keynote speaker at a past symposium. I don't remember
He
which.
has been. He's
Yeah.
been associated with MIT for quite a while.
So he posed this question,
By the
and
way, let me talk about his present position.
sure.
He left McKinsey Global Institute. He was recruited by Google, I guess the Google's umbrella. And he is Senior VP of Research and Technology at Google, reporting directly to the CEO. So he has a very, very important job at one of the top companies doing research in AI.
Yes, he's a very smart guy, and he wrote some very interesting posts, and you have analyzed them. And so he poses this question. The question is, if AI turns out to be hugely beneficial to society by 2050, what happened to get us there? And so you've written about AI needing to be more capable and safer and trustworthy. And so what does James think is the elixir to success with AI as we're going from the baby stages that we are now? And it's funny to call it baby stages because, you know, a lot of the chatbots are seem amazing, actually, but they're only going to get stronger.
Yes,
What are your
maybe
thoughts?
they are baby based on our expectations. That's the only thing. Uh, First of all, the reason James wrote this essay is because he was thinking there is no question, and you and I totally agree with this. It sounds like we're being critical of AI, but that's what researchers should be, is figure out what needs a lot of more work and then see how we can help make that happen. But he said, let's try to understand what has to be done so that AI turns out to be very, very beneficial to humanity. And then he developed a thought experiment. And his thought experiment was, let's go out to 2050. And then uh, let's assume that AI has turned out to be hugely beneficial to society, and it's generally acknowledged to have been that. How did it come about? Let's go out there and think, what did we do over the next 25 years so that in 2050 we are really proud of how great AI is? And he wrote this essay where he talked about 5 different uh, capabilities that we worked on. And one of them was, some of them are relatively clear, and you could even put them in the category of motherhood and apple pie, but they are far harder to uh, to have achieved than just baking an apple pie. So number one, we
Oh,
developed
wait a minute, Irving. I just want to point out baking a good apple pie.
making a good
That's
apple
quite
pie.
a bit of talent, and you know, I
Yeah,
don't want to.
no, I agree totally. That so let's look at that. And again, some of them sound, as I said, like, well, this is obvious. So we developed a more capable, safer, and trustworthy AI, meaning that AI systems helped us achieve our most ambitious and beneficial uses. It helped us address, this is very important, it helped us address the shortcomings of our current AI systems. It helps us mitigate concerns and build public trust so that AI does not create new harms, and worsen societal issues. Now, again, let me get back to motherhood and apple pie. You have to agree that this will not happen by itself, that it would take us as a society, including top universities like MIT, our governments at all levels, to work together to make that happen. That's why it's very important to say, boy, this is easy to say, but if you ask me, Irving, how do we do that? I have no idea right now. Second, very important, we leveraged AI to address humanity's greatest challenges and deliver positive benefits to all. In other words, instead of focusing AI on what Daron Acemoglu would call sort of bullshit automation, let's use it by assisting people, powering economic prosperity, making major advances in science, in healthcare, in research of all kinds, helping with environmental problems, etc. AI, everybody agrees, has the incredible potential to help us, but we need to go at that rather than, and I don't mean to belittle this, just use it to help us create Shakespearean poems that you want to show somebody, although that's an interesting thing. We achieve number 3, responsible development, deployment, use, and governance of AI. In other words, we agreed on how do we make sure that AI is doing what we want it to do in a very responsible way. And I don't mean that all of a sudden the Terminator comes down and how do we make sure the Terminator doesn't happen. But when we're talking about very complex technologies in our society, in our economy, it's very important to anticipate potential problems and to work on them so that when we look back 25 years later, we feel good that we had the proper governance that mitigated potential harms of AI and that good things happen because we worked on them. Number 4, I found particularly interesting. What does it mean to be human in the age of AI? Which gets to the question, in fact, I just posted a blog today on this topic by 2 MIT members of the Sloan School of Management. One of them, if I may point out, Allan, Isabella Loaiza will be a member. She's a postdoc in Sloan. She will be a member of the panel that I will once more lead at the symposium on AI and the future of work. And she and Roberto Rigobon, also at the Sloan School, have been doing a lot of research on human AI collaboration, which is a very important topic in the workforce. And here is how do we make sure that AI will require the adaptation of many aspects of our life, our social contracts, our government institutions, and we should figure out what adaptations we need AI to make, and we need to figure out how humans learn to work with these very advanced technologies. That won't happen on its own. I mean, I just told you about this research paper I just wrote a blog about to see about human AI collaboration in the workforce. Some people have said AI will automate a lot of jobs. Other people including Roberto and Isabella, and David Autor has, I think that was the subject of his keynote 2 years ago. He said, Irving, I mean, he didn't say Irving, he was giving a keynote. AI could help us rebuild the middle class because it could help people that are not quite at the top of a profession to become more knowledgeable in areas where we need more skills. And he gave the example that we don't have enough medical doctors right now. We just don't have enough. Part of it, Alan, I may be a culprit because, as you can tell, I'm getting older. And as people get older, they need more medical care, and we need that. However, what David told us is you can take professions that require a lot of training, like a master's, but not quite full medical degree, like physician assistants and nurse practitioners. And you can help educate them more and more so that they can step in and handle the kinds of healthcare delivery that we need more and more and more, that is short of this surgery or things that only a medical doctor could do. And if you do that throughout lots of jobs, you're helping people get better and better jobs, but you help our economy because of our lower birth rate and things like that. We don't have enough people to keep up. And the final one is uh, we need to figure out how to become aligned with increasingly powerful and capable AI systems. People have written articles about, oh my God, what will humanity do when we have artificial general intelligence, artificial superintelligence? The answer is, look, don't look at that as a problem. Look at that as a very good thing if we learn how do we work with increasingly savvy AI technologies, just like we've done with other technologies. And that's what he means by adaptation. We need to learn how do we work together so we can take advantage of the good things. I know it sounds like, oh, motherhood and apple pie, but these are the kinds of areas where we as a society need to focus on.
So, Irving, I'm going to state my concerns about the way James handles this topic. And then after I state my concerns, I want to tell you a little bit of a story about a project that I'm working on that I think illustrates the concerns. And then I think we can go on and talk about being human in the age of AI in
Right.
2050, okay? So my concern about James's articles is in summary that basically that he is a little bit on the side of motherhood and apple pie, and I don't feel that he puts enough emphasis on the realities of human power dynamics and corruption and the way that people try to use new technologies to gain power and because he imagines that we all work in a very cooperative way, but that's not the way things happen in the real world. So for example, yesterday Matt Taibbi was testifying before Congress talking about what he calls the censorship industrial complex, whereby there was a lot of forces trying to unify opinion on many topics, both across the major news media and social media. And, that is a dangerous precedent which can be combated by free speech, combated by uh, open dialogue. And so now let me move on to the story. So you know that I work with the MIT Concourse
Right.
program. The MIT Concourse program is dedicated to teaching MIT students about how to make use of open discourse,
Right.
and the value of people coming into the classroom and having different opinions
Right.
about things. And so the
Yeah,
question,
critical thinking, I think.
critical thinking, that's right. So the question that Linda Rabia has asked me is, could we design a classroom session to go into the classroom and use AI in a way that is an enriching experience for the students? And so she and I have been working on this. So the last experiment that I did was I used AI to do something called street epistemology, which is a practice from Peter Boghossian, and he usually does it with humans. But what I did is I did it with an AI. So basically, the idea is you make a statement, and then the person or the AI has to say, do they strongly disagree? Are they neutral, or do they strongly agree? So there's 7 selections they can make between those extremes. So I made a statement to an AI, and the AI had to say one of those 7. I agree, slightly agree, strongly agree, whatever. Um, and then I could say, okay, tell me why you picked that, and the AI would justify it. And then I could say, I want you to steel man the opposite position. Okay, now the AI would take the position. Now that in of itself isn't super interesting, but here's the part that was. I then took the same question and ran it across multiple AIs, and they took different answers. They didn't agree.
Mhm.
So what I suggested to Linda is, we could run street epistemology with a combination of students, and then students using
Yeah,
a
yeah,
AI and being the voice for the AI, and having both the students and the AIs disagree.
yeah.
Getting back to James, here's the thing that scares me. When all the AIs play street epistemology and they all agree, we have a problem.
Yeah, but this was James' opinion. He didn't say,
I understand, but this is my opinion.
no, no, I understand. Look, James is setting an agenda. I mean, remember his position. He was head of McKinsey Global Institute, one of the top. I wrote about their research often because they are superb. And now he's at Google Research. So I'm very glad he's thinking about these issues and putting them out there. Now, what I'm hoping is people will be motivated not just to keep looking at problems in the small, but to look at, okay, this is a challenge. What should we do that we are not doing? And um, see how we can come up with better ideas. And he's pointing out this is not just about building better technology. This is also stepping back and making sure that our most advanced, most powerful technologies like AI do good for society and the economy and help us, for example, in areas like inequality, which have increased significantly over the last several decades because of the impact of some of the technologies in manufacturing, in outsourcing, and so on. So I think I like this challenge of doing things like that. And we did quite a bit of that thinking in the 90s about the future of the internet. Did we get everything right? Absolutely not. Uh, I, we may forget how excited we were about social networks when they first came out, where we said, oh my God, this is democratizing the internet. Everybody can write a blog, everybody can interact with your friends. And I think right now we're not so sure if social networks are as good as we imagined they would be.
Well,
And
social networks have become a tool for social control,
well,
and and
exactly.
and
And
so that there is a pushback to that trend, and so I think
we didn't
the
anticipate
fear
it.
with AI is that the same dynamics of
Yes.
uh, using it for ill could come back to haunt us. Now, I do applaud James for trying. I just hope he keeps a realistic outlook and returns Google to their mantra of do no evil. We'll
And
see.
and let me say to the work you're doing with Linda Rabia, who I think is excellent, um, this is a challenge to say, okay, here is MIT. A lot of these AI technologies and their applications are coming from institutions like MIT. Don't just keep building technology. You need to also step back and think about how do we make sure that they do what we want them to do? What are the problems? And you could say, Irving, I'm a computer scientist, I'm a marketing student in the Sloan School of Management. That's not my job. And that's when we are in trouble. That gets back to the critical thinking that we hope our students uh, in the country uh, are engaged in. And these are hugely complicated problems. To be honest, compared to these challenges, developing a better AI algorithm is a piece of cake.
So, Irving, what's it what's it gonna mean to prosper as a human in the year 2050? Tell us.
Well, I think it means that um, you can get a good job, you can get a good education. Some of the education is likely to be assisted by AI. Some of your job is likely to be assisted by AI because you learn how leverage AI to help you do your job better, regardless of what you do. Uh, will every child have a AI advisor that helps the child? I have no idea. And I don't even know if that is a good thing or a bad thing right now. You
Now,
know,
you remember the Star Trek episode where the young Spock was, studying in that little pod with an AI teacher as well all the other Vulcan students.
yes, but
That's where we're going, right?
well, I hope not, because one of the problems with social media is the isolation of young people. Uh, Human contact is incredibly important, and physical human contact is different from just interacting over technology. And we've already seen some of the dangers of that with depression, with teenagers feeling worse about themselves because they mistakenly see people posting how great their lives are, and the people who may be posting how great their lives are may be as depressed as the person reading about it. So there is a lot to be learned here, and it's research that goes way beyond technology. Again, getting back to you and Linda talking about this is research that has to encompass uh, areas like critical thinking and liberal arts and so on that I honestly think are more important than ever because of our technologies and because of the transformations that we envision over the next 25 years.
Are you worried about AI in 2050 being more capable than any living human?
No, I'm not worried
So
because
tell us why you're not worried.
because um, I am optimistic that as we co-evolve with the technologies, we will do the necessary work to learn how to apply them to help us surmount the tough problems we encounter. I am honestly optimistic. Will that happen in all countries in the world? No. And if I may be a little bit chauvinistic, which, by the way, people like me who are immigrants to the US are the most optimistic about the US because we compare it to where we came from. And I really believe we'll be up to it. We will keep advancing, we'll keep evolving, we'll take a few steps back. But I think that's true, and I hope it's going to be true of all countries in the world. I'm really hoping that will be the case.
Well, I
That
can
may
tell.
be why I react so positively to James' article. By the way, if I may say, um, I know James, he was born in Africa. He's also an immigrant like me. And as I said before, we tend to be the more positive people and the ones who appreciate the strengths of our country. And despite the fact that, like all countries, there are things, as people say, it's still a country in progress. We still have a ways to go, but that's likely to always be the case.
Well, Irving, let me just say from my point of view, I look forward to 2050. I've had a great experience working with extremely smart humans, young and old or older. And I don't find all these smart humans to be threatening at all. As a matter of fact, working with smart people helps me achieve the things that I want to do. And if I get a smart machine working with me, I'll be delighted.
Yeah. And,
So I look forward to it.
and if I may finish with an advertising for the symposium, uh, one of the nice things about the symposium and the community that you're building is that it lets us hang out with top researchers as well as top practitioners who are the CIOs out there putting the technologies into practice.
Yes, but the community isn't limited to that. We take people from all kinds of backgrounds to come in because we want diversity of opinion. We want to have critical thinking. We want to have um, arguments like this and wrestle about the issues. And last year we had a formal debate. We're not doing it this year, but I am going to reintroduce it in the fall in an online format.
Good.
So we got a lot of stuff coming, Irving. So with that, I just want to thank everybody for coming to episode 7 of the online series. We've been talking about the online community, so please do join us. We're going to be having all kinds of online forums where you can speak and get your opinion out. But that's all we have for today. Thanks very much, and bye-bye.